I have never gone broke before, but there have been many times in my life where I could have easily gone broke. However, it never happened because I have developed certain habits that prevent it from happening. And in this video, I want to share 7 of these habits that have saved me from going broke in life. 1. Taking advantage of my advantages. The biggest financial bullet that I dodged in my life was avoiding taking on student loan debt. And I didn't dodge it because I didn't go to college, but I actually have a college degree. Instead, it was because I took advantage of my advantages throughout college. For example, throughout college I lived at home, which made me avoid over $30,000 on student housing over 4 years. My parents made average incomes, so I applied and received a Pell Grant every year, which covered a huge chunk of my tuition. And I chose affordable, public in-state schools that I could commute to, so I didn't have outrageously expensive tuition. These weren't extremely flashy, unique advantages, but when taken advantage of, they actually added up to a lot of value and were what allowed me to graduate college debt-free. Now, I know some of you might be rolling your eyes thinking, Augustine, not everyone has these advantages. You were privileged. And you're right, life is unfair and we don't all have the same advantages. However, when I was in college, there were so many people who had far more advantages than me, but decided to go about college differently and graduated with thousands of dollars in student loan debt that they are still paying off to this day. There's a quote that goes, "Opportunity is everywhere. The key is to develop the vision to see it." In life, it is so important to look at your own situation, identify your advantages, even if they're small, and take advantage of every single one of them. Because most of the time, these small advantages will carry you much further than you think. 2. Treating opportunities like they're fragile. To continue on this subject of dodging student loan debt, one of my biggest advantages to graduating college debt-free was simply living in the state of Georgia. Because in Georgia, we have this public scholarship called the Hope Scholarship, which at the time I went to school covered 80% of tuition. And this scholarship is available to all Georgia residents. The only catch is that in order to receive it, you have to maintain a GPA of 3.0 or a B average. And when I was in college, I understood that this Hope Scholarship was my ticket to graduating college debt-free, and I was obsessed with keeping my grades up so I could maintain this GPA. I never missed a class in 4 years of school. I always sat in the front row to not miss anything, and I always made sure I gave the teacher what they wanted. And because I did these things and I had this obsession, by the time I graduated with summa cum laude and $0 of student loan debt. However, despite me being so obsessed with this scholarship, it always shocked me of how many other students just took it for granted. There were so many other students who would constantly skip class, wait until the last minute to complete assignments, and then lost their scholarship after a semester or two. And once they lost it, it was extremely hard to get it back. They either 1, dropped out of college, or 2, took on a bunch of student loan debt. I mean, despite Georgia having this amazing public scholarship program, according to some sources, Georgia has some of the highest student loan debt per graduate in the United States. In looking back on this experience, it taught me one deep lesson. Opportunities don't mean anything if you don't protect them. And in my post-college life, I have always carried this habit of treating opportunities as if they're fragile, because once you start to take them for granted, that is the moment that you lose them. The third habit is starting off slow and simple. The hardest part of any financial journey are the first steps, starting to save your first $100, $1,000, and $10,000 because you're starting with absolutely nothing. However, as you start to have more, you become more secure, and reaching the next financial milestones become much easier. In one habit that's allowed me to make it through these first few steps and eventually build financial security in my life is starting off very slowly and very simple. For example, when I was in my 20s, I didn't live a fancy life and instead focused on building my financial foundation. And now that I have this financial foundation, I no longer have to live as simply because I'm financially protected. However, a huge mistake that I see people make is following the opposite path. So many people start their life very fast and complex. In their early 20s, they get a decent salary and start upgrading their lives without building or having any financial foundation, which leaves them incredibly vulnerable throughout their lives. And as they get older, building that foundation becomes a lot harder. I spent about 3 years living a very slow and simple life so I could build that financial foundation and take those first few steps. And now that I have that foundation, I am able to do so much more and live a much richer life where I don't worry that much about money. And doing this taught me, if you start off slow and simple, you'll set yourself up for a rich life. If you keep things slow and simple in the beginning and focus on building your financial foundation, once you have it, you'll be able to live a much richer life. 4. Thinking in trade-offs. For most people in this world, in order to get one thing, you have to give up something else. For every yes, you are saying no to something else whether you realize it or not. For example, if you want a new car, you have to give up a little bit of your financial security. Or if you want a new phone, you might have to give up reaching your savings goals for a few months. Life is all about making trades, and one habit that has prevented me from going broke is before making any purchase, asking myself the question, what am I giving up in exchange for this? For example, I currently have a 2013 Kia Optima, and sometimes I think it would be nice to have a newer car. But then I think about the trade-offs, a car payment, higher insurance, and slower financial growth, and then it doesn't seem as worth it. The people who are the most financially stable aren't always the ones who are making the most money, but they're the ones who understand the cost of every yes. And learning to think in trade-offs has helped me make smarter, more intentional decisions with my money. Because every yes, every purchase means saying no to something else. 5. Limit what can go wrong. People usually go broke when something in their life unexpectedly goes wrong. A surprise expense depletes their emergency fund, a job loss makes them unable to keep up with bills, or they find themselves with an expense they can't get out of. There are so many things in life that can go wrong and turn your life upside down. However, one habit that has protected me from life's surprises is just limiting what can go wrong in the first place. For example, I drive an older car, so all I have to worry about is maintenance. I keep my fixed expenses at a manageable level, so if I see an income hit, I won't get crushed by bills, and I avoid locking myself into something I can't walk away from. I can't stop bad things from happening, but I can limit what can go wrong in life. And so I choose to live a more frugal, simple life. So when something bad happens, it's still at a manageable level. 6. Always doing the math. Another common reason people go broke is because they put themselves in a situation they couldn't afford to be in the first place. For example, they decide to buy a big house because the bank approved them for the loan, but as they started to pay the mortgage, they realize it's consuming their entire budget. Or they buy a new car, but then can't keep up with their other bills. They put themselves in a tough situation because upon making the decision, they acted out of emotion instead of logic. In one habit that I've practiced that's allowed me to avoid getting in one of these situations is always running the numbers to see if it works out mathematically. For example, last year I moved from Colorado Springs to Atlanta. In doing so, increased my cost of living by about 50%. However, before I moved, I ran the numbers to make sure this increase would still allow me to live below my means and save money. In a year and a half later, I can afford to live in a city and my net worth continues to rise. And when it comes to making decisions, I never guess, assume, or just hope for the best, but I always run the numbers and see if it mathematically works out. And by doing so, I never put myself in a situation that I can't handle. And the final habit is planning for tomorrow. Right now, I have a few people close to me in life who recently retired. However, out of these people, none of them retired by choice, but they were forced into it. They were phased out of the workforce, and because of their age, they are no longer desirable in the job market. And out of these people, some were financially prepared to transition to retirement, but others were not, and are trying to figure out how to survive on Social Security alone. And it's a scary thing to see someone close to you forced into a situation that they don't want to be in. A situation where it's really too late to take any action. And seeing this very scary reality really makes you reflect on your own life and what you want your life to look like as you get older. Because the truth is, there will come a point in all of our lives where something unexpected happens. And at that moment, what will matter is how well you prepared for it today. And if you prepared, you will be okay. But if you did it, then you'll be in trouble. And now more than ever, seeing some of these scary realities play out before my very eyes reminds me how important it is to plan for tomorrow, to save for emergencies, to invest for the future, and to live a sustainable life. Because I don't ever want to be forced in a situation that I don't want to be in. And so I take steps today to prepare for tomorrow so my future self and my present self can live with dignity and never go broke. And those are the 7 habits that have saved me from going broke in life. And with that, muchas gracias. Que tenga un buen día. Nos vemos, chicos.